Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Greg and Don's Excellent Adventure, and today we're excited about what we're going to talk about. But before I do, I'm just going to introduce my friend, Greg DeMarco, and of course, I'm Don Gertz. You can see my name on my thing. But anyway, Greg DeMarco, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Greg DeMarco here. I am a sales and business mentor and deal with a lot of mindset and give a lot of inspiration to people. So I help those that are just starting out in business or who already have a business and they want to grow it. So I appreciate the camaraderie here with my friend Don Gertz.
That's great. Well, today, Greg, I want to talk a little bit about using technology in your business. I remember when computers first came out, and most of the people that are listening to this probably weren't born yet because we're so old, but I remember Microsoft had this suite of apps and they called it Microsoft Office. And I thought, well, that's brilliant. I said, because they're all going to work together, and they're going to make us way more efficient. They're going to help us to produce a lot more different information. And then I started using them and I thought, okay, like they don't really work together very well, and so, so for the last 30 years, I've been watching, different technologies come up and, okay, how can we work together? How can they make our life simpler? You remember actually back in the early 90s when the personal computer were becoming popular, they said that we were going to have so much extra leisure time because computers are going to do so much for us. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Did that work for you?
No. No, it didn't. It actually it made more work for me, to be honest with you, in some ways, because I had to learn how to use it.
It didn't work for me either. I don't know anybody that it really worked for. But nowadays, using technology is important. I mean, if you're not on the computer, I mean, we have so much power. There's so much power in our phones. I mean, like we have, and that type of thing. But how do you think technology is going to change the way that people sell, the way that people build their business, the way that people coach, all those kinds of things?
Yeah, it's a hot topic right now, with the ChatGPT and the AI that's sort of sliding into place. But I'll tell you a quick story here. Back in the day when we talked about computers, and then we got into a stage where the internet was obviously available, and when I was in the boat business, email was starting to become very popular. So it was a tool. It was a technology tool that we used to keep in touch with clients. Well, the funny thing is I started to try and sell the boats that I was trying to sell with email instead of picking up the phone and calling the clients. Well, what happened was my sales took a huge dip down. And, I couldn't figure out what was going on. And my boss finally said to me, see this? And he picked up the receiver of the phone and he shoved it in my ear and he says, why don't you try making a call? He goes, an email's not going to sell the boat for you. And I thought, well, that was rude, but he was right. And it was an eye opener because I basically stopped emailing and I started picking up the phone, calling all my leads. And lo and behold, after about 2 weeks or so, my sales started to go up again. The valuable lesson it taught me was these things are all tools to use. They're not to do the job for us. If you want to keep in connection with your clients, you've got to actually talk to them, pick up the phone or meet them. It's the human connection that makes the difference. So that's one lesson that I can say. The second one is when I look at the ChatGPT or the AI, it's going to make a difference in how we do our jobs, I think, for sure. In that we use it as a tool to give us ideas and research. And I still think that we need to put our personality into things when we send out the content that we're going to write. If we're doing a social media post or a video, it needs to come from our voice. But having that tool to give us a head start is a huge way of reducing the amount of time it's going to take to actually get to the end result. I don't know. What do you think?
When I look at the content that you produce and stuff, I've always enjoyed, reading them because you started off with a personal story. I remember the story you told about your first, I think it was a red car you had.
Yeah, that's right.
I forget,
right.
But it's a personal story, and ChatGPT is not going to be able to find that personal story about you, and that's what makes it relevant. And you can get information. And I think the AI is excellent for doing the research,
Yeah.
on different things but it's not gonna help relate, the content to somebody. So, and I think that really building our relationships should be the source of, or should be at the core of how we build our business. If our relationships are right, then we're going to be fine. But when our relationships get messy, that's when our life goes sideways. And I think you were telling me a little while ago about a study that you came across.
Yeah.
Who did that?
So this was a study, and this is really interesting. This is a study by Harvard University. It started back in the 30s, okay, the 1930s. So they started, it was a study about adult development. Okay, they wanted to see kind of what led to success for people, and the happiness level and everything else. And they started with two cohorts. They had sophomores at Harvard. Actually, one of them was John F. Kennedy. And the second cohort was a bunch of wayward kids in Boston that kind of lived on the streets. And they followed these two groups. And now that study, by the way, has been going on for 75, 80 years. They've now graduated to the siblings, the spouses, all the grandkids and everything else from the study. But what they did was, just sort of to wrap this up so I'm not taking up too much time talking about it, but the most important thing was from the study is what they found was that the reason why people were living longer, had the most success in the groups, were all the people who were still married, for example. They had great relationships with the friends, families. They had tight-knit community, and they were involved in the community. And that's what the common denominator was throughout the study that made these people the happiest, most successful, was the fact that they had these relationships going on for so many years. It dropped the level of stress, which helped improve their health. All of that played into what they figured out. And we're talking about an 80-year study here.
A long time.
Yeah, that's a long time. It's one of the longest studies. And that's what they've sort of attributed to, is the most important thing was the fact that these people had a healthy relationship and connection with people. Now, that goes a long way with what we talk about in our sales and business mentoring stuff, because basically what it's saying is the more you develop a better relationship with the buyers or the people who are making listings, if you're talking about real estate, whatever it is, the better the relationship you have, the nurturing relationship, the better results you will have for success as far as what it is that you're doing. So I found it very interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look that one up. I wasn't familiar with that study, but I've always maintained that to understand ourselves first and understand how we think and understand how we're motivated is a key part in building our relationships. Because when we understand ourselves, we will also understand other people better, but we'll recognize our blind spots, and I'll recognize easier when I understand myself. I'll recognize what about me drives people crazy. And
oh, nothing, Don.
Oh
nothing.
Yeah, that's not true. I mean, there's just talk to my wife, but that's the fun thing about it, is because the people that are closest to us know what drives them crazy, but they don't really tell us. I don't think. They just kind of learn how to work around it. But if we actually would talk about different things, we'd get along better. And technology is, I think I've always been a techie guy. I mean, I love all the gadgets and stuff like that, and I love playing with the ChatGPT or Bing Chat or Jasper or all these different AIs, and I had a program called Midjourney draw a picture for me, all on AI, and it's absolutely amazing, what we can do. But I think that we don't want to ever think that that technology can replace the human interaction. We were made for community. We were made for each other. And when things go sideways in our life, chances are it's because something in your relationships isn't right.
That's right. That's a good point. You about 5 minutes ago, you alluded to something too that was really a critical point that we're trying to make here is personal story. Nobody can write that but you. And that's, I taught this I was teaching this in Business Builder Society yesterday with my group. And I was saying, we were talking about personal branding and stuff, but basically what it comes down to is building a personal story. And that's where connection is made because you're telling a story. There's no AI out there that can tell your story better than you. And
but
that's, go ahead.
No, I'm just just on that point, you could probably use AI to create a story for you.
Yes.
But then when somebody gets to know you, they say, that's not you. I mean, like
that's right.
You represented something that wasn't true.
That's right. And herein lies the line that people have to walk is so you can use the AI for your research. Because when I'm writing my content, I always write a personal story that leads to a point, something that I've learned. Okay. So I have to preface that with my personal story. I can use the AI for maybe doing research on that point. Like, hey, this is what I learned from this. But the personal story has to come from you, I think. And that's where you're going to run into, whether you can really feel like you could trust somebody. If there's no personal side to it, why does somebody want to? You're just like the other thousands and thousands of other people. You want to get noticed, right? You want the attention.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to get any business because you're just going to be in a sea of likeness. You want to stand out, and how you stand out is being genuinely authentic and who you are. And that's how you write your personal stories. So it's a good topic of conversation, Don. I think you made some great points here.
I believe that AI is a valuable tool that salespeople, researchers, consultants, everybody should look at and say, okay, how am I going to apply this tool? How am I going to use this tool in my business? And you got to use it the right way because not every tool works, right? I had a situation one time where they're building a new house and the people that were building the house weren't experienced builders, but they knew how to swing a hammer and they knew the basics. So they decided that they'd build a house. I don't know if you're aware of this, but a framing hammer has little cross hatches on it. I'm not a carpenter, so I don't really know what the purpose is of it, but I know that a framing hammer is a big hammer and it has little cross hatches on it and maybe to grip the nail better or whatever. But I noticed that after the house was finished, that when you went around and looked at all the finished millworking, which is supposed to be nice and smooth, they actually used a framing hammer to hammer in the nails. So there was all these little indentations. So they were using a tool, but they weren't using it in the right way. It was a tool that, the hammer they would have used a hammer, but they wouldn't have used a big framing hammer, and nowadays they use staples, they just.
Well, see, that's good. You just reminded me of, way back in the day, I had this, I had hired a company to put a server in, and there was a guy designing a database, and he was from Russia. And he had a very thick Russian accent, and he was like a rocket scientist. And he came over here to work, and he was fixing the server, and he goes, there's a problem here. And I said, well, glad you're working on it because I'd use a hammer. He turned around, and very serious, like he goes, that would be too efficient. It's the wrong tool for this job. He thought I was being serious. Yeah. But that kind of reminded me of it.
Well, that's true. We need to look at what are the tools that we can apply in our belt and how do we get better? So I think that's another thing is that don't be afraid to experiment with some of this stuff either, because we can get stuck in our own way of doing things because it works, but gradually over time, if we're not continually tweaking what we're doing, we're going to become obsolete because of the way that we do things. But one thing that will never make you obsolete is building good relationships.
Yeah, that's Don. You just sort of hit it out of the ballpark there, because that to me is, like I teach a lot of the sales and business stuff in my Business Builder Society, and that's one point that I always sort of try and hit home. And we have to look at the human content, because that's what people are looking for: connection. All through history, that's what it is. It's about communication. It's about, how you make people feel. It's how you feel when you've been with somebody. How do they make you feel? You're obviously not going to stick around somebody who's making you feel like a goof. You don't want to be around people like that. You want to be around people that are nurturing and caring and care about you and what you're doing. And it's all about the relationship.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. Well, good. Thank you very much, Greg DeMarco, for your insights and your commentary on things. And as always, it's been a pleasure. But again, this is Greg and Don's Excellent Adventure, and we talk about lots of different things, but mostly we're just here to try to help you get better. So until next time, take care.
Thanks, everybody.